Hello, everybody. We are live on Coaching Show episode number 4. It is me, Sam Watson from Ireland. Gear Fisher, how are you and how is Colorado direction?
Doing very well. Happy to be here on the coaching show again, talking about stuff I love to talk about. And Colorado's great. It's summer, it's warm, beautiful day, and I love that we can connect 5,000 miles apart like this every few weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And dive into one of our favorite topics, which is, the general area of coaching. But this phrase of purposeful practice and or deliberate practice, as some people call it, it gets used a lot. It gets thrown around a lot. We're going to dive into it. We're going to dive into why it's become such a big thing, why it's so important. And I think we're always conscious that we're talking to coaches, we're talking to athletes as well. I think it's really important for coaches to be able to sell this to the people that they work with. It's really important to get that point across to athletes. This is why you train with me, because you will improve faster. It will be more effective. We just live in a world where we don't want to go through the motions anymore. And I guess that's a kind of an English phrase of the difference between practice being purposeful or not. Are we going through the motions, or are we being as effective and as improving as effectively and efficiently as we possibly can?
That's exactly right. I think anytime you start a conversation about the why of anything, you have to think about a very popular TED Talk by Simon Sinek that he did a few years ago, that the emotional part of human behavior, psychology for purchasing and understanding, believing in things, starts with the why, not necessarily the what or the how. But if you understand the why, it opens up the what and the how, and we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. So I think today we're going to talk a little bit about the why, and I actually think it's something that coaches, in my experience, often miss, because we get so caught up in the minutia of the everyday details of just execution, that sometimes we don't step back and try and understand why we do things, what the specific purpose of today's exercise is, how does that link up to future exercises? Oh, and by the way, what have we been training for? What have we been doing this for? And that's a discussion that we can kind of dive into now.
It's interesting. It actually brings up something, a piece of analysis that we've been doing and talking about from Echo Ratings over the last decade. We've seen this remarkable improvement in dressage scores in eventing. And when there's lots of theories on it. Is it because of the types of horses we ride? Is it because the courses are a little bit shorter now? But the interesting thing is, when you look at where you need to compete in each phase. So eventing, the 3-phase sport with dressage, show jumping, cross country. If you want to win, you need to be in that top 5% in dressage, whereas about 30% of people are show jumping clear, and about 25% of people are going clear inside the time cross country. So there's not a demand. You don't have to be quite as elite in cross country or as elite in show jumping, but you do need to be elite in dressage on average if you want to win. And I personally, I'm involved with the sport. I talk to a lot of riders. I know that no one else knows which percentile you need to be in each phase, but I guess we kind of work out by feel and over time, over years, that actually it's more effective to be in the dressage. But purposeful practice is about actually starting with that why, asking those questions, going, what do I need to improve most effectively here in order to reach my goal, and then practicing that deliberately.
You are talking in a general sense about how people think about specificity in their training. You took a look at eventing, obviously, that's the world, and realized that dressage is where either you have the most to lose or the most to gain. So you start focusing on dressage. and improving your scores, because you realize that improvement is going to lead to a better overall outcome, right? And this is very similar to what I believe is a very good practice for coaches. And I saw this done, at the expert level in professional cycling, where you analyze the demands of the competition and then you design training programs to address it. So in your sense, in eventing, part of those demands are where you have to have the lowest possible score in dressage. So you start figuring out how I'm going to spend time training doing that and all the things that lead up to getting a good score in dressage. In cycling, it was brought, and this only has happened literally in the last probably 10 years or so, where the measurement of the demand in cycling was done for the race, and then people went and designed training programs to meet that. As an example, there's a certain key stage in the Tour de France where they finish on a long climb, and that climb usually is in the neighborhood of 20, 25 minutes. And so it dawned on coaches, to their credit, to say, you know what, the human physiology engine actually responds different to a 20-minute effort than it does to a 1-hour effort. So they started designing training programs to give riders the ability to have their maximum power output on a 20-minute climb, so that they would be their absolute fastest on that very last section. And it was brilliant. People are always training to be climbers, but people hadn't thought of, well, I need to train to be a 20-minute climber. And that actually is part of the specificity that I'm talking about, which changed the game down to that level.
Yeah, it's interesting. That will remind me of those first couple of times when you show jump an event to us the day after cross country, compared to all our national classes and or the majority of our national classes and most of our short format international classes where we show jump before. It's just such a different feeling. And then you start, okay, now I can actually, now that I know that it's that different, I need to train specifically for that. And I think even for trainers, really delving in deeper within the phase. So not just the order of the phase, but then we start to get into the real detail, going, well, what changes? Is it the elasticity in the horse's stride? Is it the length of the horse's stride? That's the first thing that I start to notice. So then I've got to work on being able to make the horse more elastic, shorten the stride a little bit. Is it the kind of the vertical power in the jump? The day after cross country, they've got a lot of, their jump has gotten more and more horizontal as the cross country round goes on. And then when you come back for show jump, you're trying to get that power going vertical again. And I just love working in that detail. But I think that's what the world wants now. I think they don't want to be, kind of in that zone where they kind of fear, well, do I understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it? Diarmuid will kill me if I don't start with why. Do I know why I'm doing something and how I'm going to do it and what I'm doing? But that fear of do other people have this? Do other people have a better way? Is there a more purposeful way? So I think my big appeal is for coaches to start talking about why they train the way they do, how they train the things that they train, how they improve the things that they improve, and then the details of what those exercises are, because that's the thing that I want people to take away. I want to get people thinking about specificity in training, that we are training for these specific events and talking about them, naming them, whether it's that show jumping after cross country, whether it is taking that dressage warm up from 45 minutes where the horse might be over the peak to 35 minutes where they're going to still be physically fresh enough to deliver their best test and not be kind of over it a little bit. Let's start talking about specificity, and let's start showing those exercises, how we do it. How is the fascinating part. There will be differences, and I think that's your shop window as well. I was talking about, as a coach, exactly, that because I think people will appeal to, or they'll they'll like some of your techniques. You know, I would range from show jumping with accuracy, which is very formulaic, to my cross country is real off-road. I love to focus on footwork with cross country, because if the horse has footwork, the horse has confidence. They can deal with they can get it out of any situation, and they're much more comfortable. Good footwork means you get away with way more, which is really comforting for me as a rider. But footwork is really fun to train because I use loads of undulations, loads of ups and downs. I build, wacky distances and stuff like that. And it's good fun. I don't go too high. It's not jumping big, full height oxers that I have to be accurate for. It's much more about playing on lower level jumps with kind of off-road terrain, little ditches and stuff. And it's really fun. But if I'm talking about that as a coach, and if I'm if I'm leading with the why, so that your horse has the confidence to deal with whatever situation you end up with, a lot of riders go, oh, that's exactly what I need, because my biggest fear across country is that I put my horse on a bad spot and he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to get out of it. And I'm saying, well, we're going to train for that situation. This is how we're going to do it. It's footwork.
Perfect. Yeah, the only way to get people to really believe in your methodology is the how part, is for them to understand why. How does good footwork turn into, getting over a jump or getting a low score? So I've seen coaches that tie that together very well. Hal Hagen is a very popular running coach here in the US, and he's not the super sports science type of approach, but rather with every workout, he explains the reason for the workout. This particular workout is going to address when you hit that wall at 20 miles during the marathon. This particular workout is going to give you speed work. Why do you want speed work? Oh, that's going to help your running economy. And he just does a great job of making every workout lead to something bigger. And as an athlete, as you consume that, and I think I put myself in the shoes of any athlete listening to a coach, you can just blindly trust, based on experience and your results, et cetera. But I think you get even more out of the athlete when they truly believe. And that belief will come from the why side. How, I don't know how to do that. The how is just tell me what to do, coach. Oh, line up poles, jump over them 8 times, whatever. But if you really think about the why side, that's what gets people to believe, and belief will get your athletes to do anything. And, even stepping back further, I have to mention too, deliberate practice and being very purposeful about your approach. It's often not super fun. It's often, quite tedious and methodical, and you don't have to do it, right? You can just go out and ride and enjoy it. But we're really kind of trying to appeal or talk today to the folks that are looking to achieve something, maybe, get a little bit of growth, or they have a specific goal, or they've been in a rut, right? This is an approach, a framework, if you will, to training that not only will help the coach better articulate what they're doing, it will get that athlete to believe more in what they're doing, and then trust on all of your skills and techniques to actually achieve, a particular goal.
Yeah, well, it's what we're talking about exactly is training, specifically for a goal in mind, and with an outcome. Now, what I love about starting with why there is, think about, because I've just been doing this while you've been talking, think about what you would start typing into Google if you're an athlete and you're blocked. You're saying, okay, I've got a horse coming back off an injury, and it wasn't a soft tissue injury, but they were standing still for 4 weeks for whatever reason. How do I bring them back up to speed? How much fitness will they have lost? People are going to start doing these, searching for help, starting with why, starting with the problem that they're presented with. It could be an issue with their horse. My horse, every time I halt, he doesn't stand still. Why? What's happening? And how do I fix it? And when you start with the reason behind all of these problems, this is where people are going to be. This is where they're going to be unblocked. I want to go for a longer hacks with my horses. How do I build up my fitness? He's currently probably only fit enough for 20 minutes work. How much can I increase that week on week? These kind of things. So fitness plans, and that's what they are, like how to get your horse fitter. But you are starting much more in English, appealing to actually how people feel about a situation. They feel stuck. Why are they stuck? And try and solve the problem, and try and talk to the people that you're trying to communicate with in that way, from that direction.
Yeah. And let's also kind of bring out the point too, where we have to keep it in the realm of what can you control, right? Great. I want to win the Olympics. Okay. That's an ultra high level goal. And that's why you're out riding every day. But you can't just go and do a workout with the goal being, I want to win the Olympics. You have to break that down into very small steps. You then build that plan up to something like that, right? Like that's where trotting over poles and repeating that process 20 times with 5 strides in between leads to some particular long-term goal. But you can only control what you can actually, control. And I think a lot of times, as you think about, how you're going to get somewhere, it doesn't allow you to put yourself in enough control of the situation or with the coach and designing exercises that you can do. So don't let it get too ethereal and too widespread. It can literally be down to the daily, we're going to do this exercise because of a certain micro goal. We even had a coach, my daughter who's in show jumping. I really liked a coach she worked with. Very first lesson she did, she asked my daughter, why are you using that saddle? Why are you using these, that bit, all the tack, and went through and tried to understand the purpose and need for all that tack, match it with the horse's strengths and weaknesses. And I just thought that was a really incredibly good approach. She'd never met her, never seen her ride. And that was one of the first conversations she had. So everything from that very initial, conversation, and then eventually throughout the training programs built.
Yeah, but coming from a skill sport point of view, I would say that understanding is so important. So understanding what's important when it comes to show jumping. When we break it down into the attributes of the rider, their balance, the attribute of the horse in terms of their technique, but trying to understand those things is really important. Like for me, and this was not that long ago, it's after a second World Games, to go that I'm still just not that accurate enough. And it's that simple, that if I solve that part of it, it is so much easier for a horse to jump cleanly over a fence. If that range and takeoff point is only about 20 centimeters, 25 centimeters, if I'm varying it by up to a meter, it's just so much harder for the horse to work it out. And so I just lived on it because I understood why it's important. I had the kind of scales of training, like Dad would talk to me about it, learning dressage, talking about rhythm and suppleness and contact and pulse. There is a scale. There's 6 things that you work on there. But I never went in and understood why that was important, because I was like, oh, it's just theory. It's just, you can't have something just told to you. You have to understand why it's important. Is it the same, Gear, when we say that the cyclists now, there must have been a point when they went from just sitting on a bike and putting in miles to actually understanding about rest, understanding about aerobic, anaerobic, power, watts. When did those kind of terms evolve?
Yeah. And that was, it's been 25 years or so now, if not longer, 30 years. You're talking about ways to measure improvement, ways to account for the what you're doing. So in cycling, and in endurance sports, fitness is the governing skill. It's your fitness that leads to a good outcome in a race, right? So how do you get more fitness? Well, you ride more, you run more, right? You row more, and you get more fit. At a certain point, that curve starts to flatten out, and you can't just keep rowing more. You can't just keep riding more. And you factor in a busy, like if you're not a professional athlete, you've only got so much time in the week to dedicate to the effort. So you start looking for more efficient ways to train, right? Better ways to get a higher return on investment. And so that's where being able to measure your output came along. So in cycling, the best metric that could possibly guide a person became power. How much power can your legs churn out? How many watts can you crank out, and for how long? Because there's a direct correlation to how much power you can put out and how fast you go. All right, no matter if there's a headwind, if you're up a hill, etc. More power equals faster you can go. The longer you can hold it, the faster you can go. And sure, in equestrian and lots of other skill sports, there isn't necessarily an exact one single measurement that you can measure to control and then design workouts around. But there are lots of objective ways, I think, that you can go about improvement. I mean, one really great fairly objective measure, even though it's a subjective thing, is just even a dressage score, right? Look at how you can measure your dressage scores over time, and they're going up or trending down. Then in cycling, because we were able to start measuring things quite closely, we were able to start seeing the effect of different particular workouts and how it had an effect on whether it was that 20-minute hill climb, whether it was riding as hard as you can, as long as you can, whether it was recovery, where there's sprinting. There's lots of subtle things that you can work on, just like in equestrian. Lots of subtle things like suppleness and footwork that ultimately lead to an overall better outcome. And again, I know coaches are doing this by nature already and have been, where there's tons of exercises to work on all those things. What I think we're trying to say, though, is there's maybe a stronger way to tie that all together. Understanding how suppleness leads to lower scores, or how footwork makes for better score, how accuracy helps improve jumping. A lot of it can be somewhat second nature, but you can start to see in equi ratings. Obviously, you guys lead the equestrian world in coming up with these metrics to track. Now, if you have the metric to track, how do you design exercises to improve them? So, we are seeing some cool devices come along. Maybe that's the next coaching show. I'd love to talk about some of the devices that are out there that are being used now to bring more objective measurement, but that's another topic.
Yeah, but that's what I think is going to be fascinating to hear more of. I don't hear enough of people talking about the specific things that they are improving and why they are important. I have spent so much more time in the last 12 months in dressage focusing on contact, because the why was, when I was looking at the guys who score really well, it's like these guys don't make any mistakes. Like they just go through the motions. Like this horse is just the easiest thing to ride. It just looks so easy. And the one thing I started to focus on was contact. It was just the horse was so happy on the end of the rein. The rider's hands were so still. You look at Michael Young, Ingrid Klimke riding, nothing moves. It's just so effortless. And I was like, what if I just start focusing on contact all the time? And then I was making no mistakes. And when you start if you can start from a foundation of where everything's a 7, you're suddenly at a score that I was rarely at, which is a 30. All you need is 7.5 and you're into the 20s. And we managed to improve a lot of the scores last year, starting from that, getting that foundation really, really solid. And that idea of make no mistakes came from having, for me, and again, this is I suppose where it's personal, and this is where we do want to make it more objective, but it was getting the contact right. I've talked loads about the accuracy one in show jumping, how that turned around that phase for me. And the footwork one, one of the things, and I know with cross country that things go your way and there is chance at play, but the last decade I was one of very few riders to, at long formats, have 100% completion rate. That the horses finished every long format at 4 and 5 star, which is hard to do. I think I was the only rider with over 20 runs that managed to do it over the decade at that top level. But because falls do happen in the sport, it's high risk. But because I trained that footwork all the time, it helped when I was in those sticky situations. It helps me to cope with them, and it helps the horse to cope with them. And if that is your goal, if for the people who are saying, I'm just not completing enough, I'm not getting around, I'm having too many, I thought they were unlucky falls, I thought they were unlucky mishaps. But now you have something specific to work on. And I guess when you look back, particularly in the period that we've just been through, we've been through this period of isolation, and for people who were able to train at home, I think every time you reflect, a way of asking yourself, is my training deliberate enough? Can you look back on your last month and say what you worked on and why you worked on it and how you worked on it? Ideally, you want to be able to quantify how much it improved. That is difficult, but ideally that's what you want to be able to do. And yes, in our sport, the competitions tend to be that barometer, but I would I have a lot of testing in my training program, so I do test things. Again, I'm of that mindset, and it doesn't sound fun, but I try and make some of the tests fun, by balancing poles on things, even for the footwork, being able to get through that nimbleness, not making mistakes, being able to do 20 reps without knocking a pole. You can invent those sort of things to check, am I improving? Because that's an important part of it as well.
Yeah. Well, as we're kind of winding down, the goal of our chat today was to just reflect on specificity, but it was to get coaches thinking of specificity in their training, right? Like get coaches making exercises so that they'll improve specific attributes, right? Think about, where that horse is today. What's the key limiter that's keeping them from having a great result in whatever the competition type is, and ultimately getting the coaches to think about the why and start with the why, so that the athlete understands, the reason for a succession of events. And certainly, I've seen coaches, they watch a particular athlete in any sport, and athletes are always making either mistakes or whatever, and they just hone in immediately on today's mistakes. Right. And you focus on today's mistakes and come back the next day and focus on that day's mistakes. So it's like, step back and think about, for these individual person, athlete, match with their goals, what are the actual specific limiters of that person? How can you design a program, and don't necessarily just focus on today's mistakes and today's exercise? So I think that's the sort of frame of mind that we're hoping people will put themselves in, both athlete and coach.
Yeah, it is. It's we wanted to we talk about it in our webinars, which we have one coming up next Tuesday. We have a webinar next Tuesday that you guys can sign up for, and that will be on EquiRatings and OnForm website. Dee will post it in this link as well, where there's a link. I'm sure he's backstage, and I need to get smoother at that link. But we growing the coaching business. This is one of the things that we're appealing to do, because I think people, there's so much room in equestrian sports to train more, to have more purposeful practice, to communicate more with your coaches. And to have a lot of that support can come remotely. It's by nature, a lot of, horses living on farms in the middle of nowhere, most of us are not based physically with our coach. So that's where OnForm has come in to help with that remote side of it. and to complement when we are coaching in person, to have that video feedback, but to have more purposeful practice in there. We want coaches to promote why they do what they do, why they have their approaches that they have to training, to show how they improve things more. This is how I improve footwork. This is how I improve accuracy. This is how I improve contact. Are you struggling with these things? Appeal to people through that limbic brain. Is that what Sinek called it? Limbic.
Yeah, that's the feeling side. Yes, nicely done.
The feeling side. But that is how people will think. They'll go, oh, that really resonates with me, because counter pole exercises don't necessarily, if I post a thing going, 3 counter pole exercises that you need in your life, I imagine people will kind of keep skipping past that. But it really addressing the why, and just talking about it more, as you say, like what you went through, asking the questions. Why are you using that saddle? Why are you using that equipment? To help develop the understanding, get people thinking about it. I think it will just get the whole conversation moving faster and get people really fascinated in training and doing more in the training space.
Yeah, and my background in this objective, measurable world of endurance, in a skill sport, I believe video was the thing you could look at as the, quote, measurable moment. And that was really the genesis of OnForm, was to make video so easy to share and use as a tool so that the athlete and coach can see their improvement, can see what they're doing wrong, can see how it should be done right, to compare a video from a month ago, and I've been working on my straightness, and look at your straightness today, and whatever the particular skill metric is. That was the basis of why video is so useful. It is ultimately a tool. And so, wrapping a platform around video is OnForm, and being able to communicate that back and forth. We've got thousands of people using the platform. We've been out for a few months now. We'd love to have people come give it a try. And, if you're feeling stuck, if you've been struggling, ask your trainer, like maybe more specific questions. Maybe there's tools like OnForm that can help. There's also a whole wealth of people. Certain trainers focus on certain aspects. We can help, and I hope it's been good for people to think a little bit differently about starting with why.
Yeah, and let's look at it from the athlete point of view as well. If you're listening to this, and as you say, Gary, you're stuck, ask your questions. Or if you're thinking, are there new exercises that I want to try? Could I be doing something more effectively? The more we communicate on this, I think the better. And I just, the geek inside me just can't wait to. I love listening to other coaches. I love listening to other people's ways of solving these problems, that are genuine for people. So it's cool. That's what progress is all about. So yeah, there we go. Thank you, Gear, for joining us again, and thank you everyone else for watching as well. We will see some of you potentially on Tuesday, and we will see the rest of you, I hope, in 2 weeks' time. But thank you for watching this Friday, and join us again soon.
Thank you.